Hello, welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. I'm William Gallagher. Our sponsors are Fast Growing Trees and Factor. And I would like to start, please, by saying thank you to everyone who asked about my finances after last week when I admitted that I was now impoverished because I'd just bought a new Mac Studio. I would like to reassure you that everything is fine. And in fact, it's more than fine because right moments before we started recording, I was checking my email. And Apple Intelligence's summarizing feature tells me that Amazon has now sent me a royalty payment of $100 trillion. Wes Hilliard, why am I even talking to you? Why am I not off somewhere already?
I've definitely gotten a few of these money ones where if there is any dollar amount anywhere, it just attaches a dollar sign to a number and it becomes the new money. Yeah. And it seems here you've got a transaction number that became money somehow.
Exactly right. I mean, if you don't happen to get royalty checks from Kindle, and I get, $3 and $4 at a time, get me. They have this weird system where they will notify your payment is coming, but they will never say what it's going to be, but they do give it a nice, very long transaction number. And yes, Apple Intelligence saw that, figured that's what I'm worth, and put it on there, which seems, not unfair.
Yeah, I mean, I still find these summaries useful, but it is one of those things where you really have to pay attention. I mean, I hope you weren't taken in thinking that you were suddenly a trillionaire.
Well, I said some rude things to Apple Insider, the Writers Guild, all the charities I worked for, and I have spent a while now phoning them all back, grovelling. But, that's just a normal kind of weekday thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. One thing I like, I mean, I don't like this, but I do, I admit it, I do like it a bit. A few weeks ago, we were pointing out on Apple Insider that Siri has somehow actually got worse instead of better. I mean, we understand the reasons why all the new features aren't here yet, and that's, perfectly fine, delays happen, but the fact that the existing service was getting worse was noticeable to me, and now it seems like everybody is doing it. It's a thing going around as we record this. People saying if you ask Siri what month we're in, it hasn't one thin clue and stuff like that. So
it's definitely been a meme, but at the same time, of course, I'm on the other side of this, just saying, okay, look, I get it. It's stupid that it doesn't know what month it is. It can't tell you the time. Like, there's certain things that you can ask that it's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's just like, you should know this. It's very basic stuff. But on the other side of that coin is, don't ask it those things. And just, control your music and your home and do basic queries and you'll be fine. But I'm with you. Like, it shouldn't be getting those things wrong. But I'm still of the mind of, like, is it, like, where is the wrongness here, right? And I agree. It is answering things worse than it used to. This Apple Intelligence transition has caused some oddness, especially where it's throwing to ChatGPT now. But is maybe our expectations for what it should be able to do out of whack as well? Like, are we partially to blame for some of these mistakes because we're asking it to do things it honestly shouldn't need to do?
Well, I'm going to go with no. Because I don't think we're asking anything unreasonable. I don't think we're asking anything that we haven't asked before of it. So how can it be unreasonable to expect it to do what it used to do all the time? I mean, it's always had the odd hiccup, but asking normal things normally seems...
there's definitely a few bugs. Like, I agree with that. Like, there's a couple of places where it's falling apart, but... I still think it's we're maybe a little overboard in some of the backlash just because, again, it's still doing like the base feature set that it's supposed to do. What they introduced 12 years ago and what they've iterated upon since sending messages, controlling your music, controlling your Apple Home, setting timers. I know sometimes you get the odd one there, William. And then, alarms, controlling your grocery list. Like, those everyday things, those everyday needs are still being met, at least by me on my end. I'm seeing that. I do get the occasional error, but 80% functionality here is honestly good enough at this point, and I expect it to get better now that they're going to put an LLM in there, maybe work on eliminating some of the factors that could lead to hallucination. Like, they're definitely working on it, but the core feature set hasn't changed. Now, yes, it should Apple did announce a feature a while back of ask it about sports and it'll know everything. And it currently does not know anything about sports and can tell you about one specific Super Bowl from 20 years ago. Like, that's the kind of silly frustration that's happening. So I'm with you on that. Like, the complaints are valid. But I do think that, just like it always has been, the hate on Siri is a little bit overboard and maybe misguided. Pick on the things that deserve being picked on, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm never going to be with you on this until they all fix it, because I don't agree that the core functionality is working. But weirdly, that peculiar bug of timers that I've had, and I admit I haven't seen anybody else having, I haven't had that in a couple of months now. That seems to be working, but regular day-to-day normal stuff, the core functions as you took it, are not working at the moment. But let's go way the other way. I mean, you talked about, is it our fault? Are we overreacting in a way? How do you feel about the calls that Tim Cook should fall on his sword and beg us for forgiveness about Apple Intelligence or something like that?
That's silly. I mean, this is, just go back and read what I wrote last week. It's the same thing. It's overreaction. These technologies barely exist in the eye of the public. All they know is that they're supposed to like artificial intelligence and that it's supposed to be a good thing. Otherwise, they can't tell you what it does or what it's for. And Apple Intelligence, honestly, is doing great for what it's supposed to be doing. Yes, the what is it called? The image playground is making ugly images. That's not really a problem. I don't think anyone was in Apple thought that was going to be a serious function. It's kind of like Memoji. It's a toy. And the summaries are getting things wrong on occasion, and they had to disable the news side of things. But otherwise, proofreading and editing text, doing the photo, object removal, these other functions, all fine.
I do think visual intelligence is excellent. I mean, that is impressive. And I find that it is something that actually I use quite a lot. Not a little bit of new toy-itis about it, but I still like it a lot. So, I'm not coming at this from the position of it's all wrong and terrible. I am actively annoyed by Siri because of things I used to rely on. I now can't. I've actually got to push buttons, I mean, like an animal or something.
Well, yeah. What's crazy, so just to reiterate, like for me, because maybe I'm just using Siri wrong, but it just feels like I'm using it for controlling my music, controlling my home, timers, grocery lists, reminders, stuff like that. That's the scope of use for me. I don't know what I would honestly use it for beyond that. Asking when Abraham Lincoln was elected, maybe? I don't know, like what people are supposedly using it for. Setting up shortcuts in the Shortcuts app and then calling out to that shortcut through a HomePod. That's when it starts getting complicated, but that generally works as long as that shortcut is able to be enacted by the HomePod. Setting up scenes in HomeKit still works. So I don't know. I mean, I get it. The things that are wrong are stupid. I agree with that. Like it should know what month it is. But at the same time, it's just like, I'm over here like, okay, well, I'm still going to use it the way I've been using it and be fine. So I've been making this point on social media lately about several different topics. More than one thing can be true. The Apple's Assistant could definitely use some work. There's things that need to be addressed. There's things that are definitely worth criticizing. But it's also true that it's working fine for me, right? So, I don't know. That's kind of one of those funny conversations.
Although I don't get it to play music reliably. I used to check my calendar quite often with it. What was the next meeting, and forget that. That's just gone now. So I don't find them silly mistakes. I find them active annoyances. But admittedly, I mean, none of this compares to, say, the change with Alexa, is it? Because that's a bit of a difference going on there. Alexa is working perfectly, but in a way that we might not necessarily like.
This is complicated because Amazon has pushed back against the narrative a little bit that they're going to basically be using everyone's voice data for training. Who knows what's actually happening? And until they can get like some sort of third-party verification on what they're actually doing, I honestly would never trust Amazon with anything. But they're claiming that the removal of the local voice processing option on certain Echo units, apparently it's only specific ones, is just a thing they're doing. It's not meant to be related to gathering more data. They're just turning off this function on certain devices where people, and only notifying people that had it previously enabled, and that's it. But still puts up a red flag that they're doing this around the time that they want everyone to go to Alexa Plus. They're going to need more data because as we've learned, all these AI models just need more data. That's the only way to get them to work well. And even with a mountain of data, they're still bad. So I'm curious how this Amazon stuff's going to work in the wild. We've seen some canned demos. Journalists have got to play with units set up in little hallways somewhere. But I'm still very curious as to how this is going to work and if this is going to be another embarrassment for Apple as far as Apple Intelligence goes.
A week ago or so, I would have felt a little worried about Amazon, but now I'm feeling a little guilty. You know, they've got to make back their $100 trillion that they're paying me somehow. So any system they've got like that. I'm not actually clear when that's all supposed to be kicking off, what changes there are, but it's soon, isn't it?
Within the next month, and that's kind of what they said was like initial rollout, I guess, by the end of March, early April, and then more to come. So I don't know what that means, which features are coming when. I'm sure there's some sort of press release somewhere describing everything, but I don't know. I'm curious how Echo users are going to be utilizing this, if they're going to be, because I mean, if you pay for Amazon Prime, you get it automatically. If you don't, you have to pay $20 a month or something. Or a year. I don't know. There's some number out there, but it's not free. But yeah, interesting. I'm curious how Apple will answer it with WWDC this year, how they're going to approach Apple Intelligence. If it's just going to be like, we're doing nothing, just improvements. And it's just, like, are they going to go that route, or are they going to try to pile 10 more features on top of what they already have?
We actually have, I think it's called an Echo Dot. It was given as a present a few years ago, and it sits in our living room, and every now and again it says, would you like to buy more toilet paper or something, which is actually quite a concerning question for it to ask, but it does. Do you use any Echo in your house?
I don't have anything related to Amazon in my home.
Okay.
Right. When we've also canceled our Prime membership. That's, we're not going to associate with that company anymore. It's just, push comes to shove, it's become worse and worse of a company. I'm putting it in the same category as Twitter and stuff like that.
Okay, you should at least have waited till the end of Reacher Series 3. There's only a couple more weeks of that.
I do think that Amazon and these other companies are putting the pressure on Apple, which is always a good thing. Competition is good. Whether or not you believe Apple is behind, Apple internally is definitely not happy with how they're being viewed. The head of Apple Intelligence and Siri definitely had a closed-door meeting that apparently leaked to Bloomberg. And there was this whole conversation of, why did we even talk about this feature if it wasn't available for prime time? And they're also upset that there was this conversation in the public eye, which is just a very un-Apple thing to do. But I'll still argue that, because they didn't specify in this little meeting, but it still seems to me that they had it working, and that's the only reason why they had the confidence to show it at any point. But the level of error is not acceptable to Apple, and that's why it's not ready, and that's why it's not releasing yet. But
yeah, I remember reading that, was it something like 60% of the time it works? And I thought, well, actually, that's really encouraging, because the rumours had been that it didn't exist at all, or that it wasn't functioning in the slightest. So 60% means they're going to get it fixed at some point and it will work. So that was quite reassuring. Yeah.
And that's a better track record than the other AI things, because apparently it's the inverse for everyone else. They get answers wrong 60% of the time. So if you're using any of these search functions like Gemini search or Google's whatever intelligent results, ChatGPT search, research is showing 60% of the time they get the answers wrong. So, but yet those are like being treated as God by people. I don't know. It's so funny to watch all of this unfold. Yes, Apple had some embarrassing stuff released, but man, I don't know. I've already put it down into words, but it still feels like people just don't understand that, like, half the time you're being lied to by these companies and you're being told these narratives that just don't exist. And then you're looking at Apple and being like, wow, they're so behind. And it's like, well, if you actually look at it, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
You know, the world the way it is these days, I'm surprised anybody believes anything. But yeah, I remember BBC News got Apple to switch off notifications because it was basically accrediting the wrong information to BBC News. So obviously an important thing. One of the examples was that it implied that somebody had died for it when they hadn't. So that was in a headline summary that Apple Intelligence got wrong. But this week, some man, I think in Norway, is attempting to sue ChatGPT because he decided to just look himself up, and he got this bio of himself talking about how he murdered his children and was in prison for it.
Oh, good Lord.
None of this is true. So I noticed that's not getting as much attention as the headline snafu that Apple did. So there are, as ever, different reactions depending on who's getting it wrong. But
yeah. And I see people praising Perplexity all the time, and they're the company that just outright stole and didn't care. Like the other companies like would go out of their way to pull back a little bit, but Perplexity's just like, yeah, whatever. The do not crawl command, we're just going to ignore that. We're just going to do whatever we want. And they've just been outright awful in the way that they handle data and stuff. So, and yet people are just like, look how amazing these guys are.
Yeah.
And,
Perplexity is depressing. I mean, apparently they did do that. They ignored the criticism. They did go into it, but they also said quite pointedly beforehand that they wouldn't do something like that. So to me, that feels worse. And I left Perplexity because of that. And yet I've kind of come back to it as my kind of default search things. So I'm complicit in this AI ethical abuse thing. And I'd like to move on, actually, while I don't think about that too much. How about the fact that we don't know when Apple Intelligence is going to go to the next level. We don't know when Siri will be, well, fixed, in my opinion. We don't really know when Amazon's doing what, but what we know for absolute certain is all the rumours about the iPhone 17, because we've seen the lot now, haven't we? We have seen moulds of camera protrusions and things. Do you know, when you say it like that, it feels like you should get a life, really. Oh, I've been studying the protrusions of a camera on a mould of a phone that doesn't exist yet and things. And yet we do. The moment we see these things, surely we stare at them. Or is that just me? Are you looking at me now?
Well, we're getting increasingly detailed molds, so that's interesting. And we're finally seeing what this two-body style of the Pro phones are going to look like. I mean, we've seen hints of it before, but they were rough sketches. This is a little bit more absolute. And I could see it. I mean, it basically the idea is the entire phone is encased in metal, except for the camera bar and the area where wireless charging and MagSafe would go. So imagine a piece of glass the shape of a MagSafe wallet on the back of your iPhone Pro, right? So interesting. I don't know. Again, molds are never going to do this justice. I'm curious what this is going to look like in real life, and how Apple's going to portray it. Is it going to be this dull metal tone all the way around, and then this glassy finish be like this bright color to give it kind of a two-tone finish? Are the black phones going to have titanium borders and black centers? Like, it could be interesting how they model this, but I like the idea of adding ever so slightly more metal and more protection and sturdiness to the frame by having just more. And then, because glass itself too is heavy, so maybe this is where we're getting into the idea that parts of the phone will be aluminum, parts of it will be titanium, and parts of it will be glass. So they're maybe mixing up the materials a little bit. These are going to be very curious phones for sure.
I'm interested that you said titanium there, because I was going to ask you about that. There was a series of rumours a few months ago that titanium was out and that aluminum was in and things. But now it seems he's settling on we're having everything. It's a composite. Is that right?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how you would do this. This is the part of materials that I'm not going to be familiar with, but like I don't know how they would do this, but apparently there's been some rumor of a aluminum glass kind of alloy, like I don't know, maybe the way I would see it is the outer frame and the backing that isn't the charging surface is all titanium alloy, because none of it's pure titanium anyway. And then the glass portion would actually maybe be an aluminum surface, and then only the MagSafe magnet portion that allows the charging through be a glass surface. But it all looks like glass because of how it's put together. So I don't know. We'll see. Apple's always playing around with materials, so this could be interesting.
As the more of a photographer of the two of us, it looks pretty certain now that there'll be this new camera bar design. How are you feeling about that now?
I mean, I never really liked this, but looking at the camera bump on regular iPhones now, especially the 17 Pro, it's already past the 50% mark. So this isn't really much of a stretch, literally. We're going from like 75% to 100% coverage on the back of the phone. And then the Pro Max, of course, it's going to be enormous. But I don't know. It's different. It's a different approach for how to house all of these components. It means having more capabilities in the cameras. We're talking about in the future, the iPhone, where are we? iPhone 18, 17's this year. Yeah. We have the 16 now. It's so hard to keep up anymore. I'm writing about so many rumors. So the 18, because I think I said 17 earlier when I meant 16. So there you go. But the 18 coming out in 2026, that would have the camera bar, but also more space for something. There's a rumor about variable aperture. So piling that in on top of optical image stabilization, on top of the tetraprism lens, you're going to need the space. And so this makes sense from that angle, and that's why the camera bar exists on other smartphones like the Google Pixel. I just hope that Apple can put an Apple spin on it and make it look good and make sure they explain why it's there.
Well, actually, why is it there? What would variable aperture mean to me as a photographer?
It's a fancy way of saying it works like a camera. We have fixed aperture lenses right now, so 1.2 or 2.2 or whatever Apple usually lands on. It depends on the camera. That f-stop is what determines how much is in focus, more or less. The closer you are to a subject, at a f1.2 f-stop would basically make the background more and more blurry until, of course, you get so close that it can't even focus on the subject and everything's blurry. But the higher, this is where photography gets complicated. The lower the numbers, the higher the f-stop. Right. So anyway, if you get to 1.2, 1.5, normal cameras. So my Sony camera that I shoot photos for work, right? I'm shooting product photos with. It's more of a 2 to 4 range, and then it goes from there. So I can set it down to 2.4, and that's going to get incredible blurriness, bokeh effect on a subject, especially if I zoom all the way into my 200 millimeter limit. That's going to be great for product photos and portraits. But if I'm taking a landscape, you're going to want to widen that out. But see, the problem is once you get to 10 or 15 or even 20 f-stop, the amount of light getting in is much, much lower because you're basically closing that. It's all inverse. Y'all just need to go read about f-stops because it's almost backwards in every way you would think. The higher the number, the more closed the thing is, the less light gets in, but the more area it's able to focus on. It's so weird, but that's photography for you. So on an iPhone camera, instead of artificial bokeh where you can adjust it in post using digital sensors to basically layer two images on top of each other and make it do a forced perspective through the bokeh effect. You've seen it in portrait mode. You won't need that portrait mode because the main camera would have a variable aperture that you could select while taking a photo.
So Craig Federighi, or actually more likely Phil Schiller, is going to stand there and say variable aperture, good, and then move on. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, customers don't need to understand it. I think the camera stuff's all very interesting. It's, I mean, it's based on how our eyes work, so it's always fun. Like if you've ever looked at an eye, the thing that goes around your pupil, your iris, is basically like a camera shutter. It has folds that open and close, and that's how you can see if someone's eyes dilate. It's like the shutters are opening. It's really wild, but notice too, if your eyes dilate, everything gets brighter and blurrier, just like a camera. But anyway, the whole thing's interesting from that perspective. If this isn't a photography podcast, if you guys want to go learn about it, just go read up on aperture and how cameras work. But the layman's terms, it's going to be yes, you'll be able to they'll basically promote it as better portrait mode. Your camera will not need the telephoto lens or the wide angle lens to work with the main camera to get the correct bokeh. It'll just get it from the main lens naturally, and then pair that with some computational photography bokeh, and you're going to be able to get incredible results, I think.
It does amaze me that they always find something else to improve in the camera.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe this is a bit more prosaic, and actually I don't know if this brings it back to the iPhone 17 rumours, but I've asked you about this before, the camera bar. When we talked about this before, you knew, or at least it seemed very likely, that even though there will be this camera bar, the cameras themselves, the lenses, will still protrude further than that. Does that still appear to be the case?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the camera bar is there to save space, but you still need even more space for the lenses, because the more distance you can get between the glass of the lens and the sensor and the phone, the better images you can take.
It seems like a mischance to me. Every time I put my phone down, it wobbles because of the camera bump, and a bar would not only stop the wobble, but it would hold the phone at just a slight angle to make it easier to read. But
the camera protrusions here look a little more mild than on more recent Pro phones, and that's because the camera bars may be helping with that. But there's still definitely going to be camera bumps on top of the camera bar.
And that includes on the expected iPhone 17 Slim or Air or whatever it's going to be called. So that's the one section that can't be reduced by the sound of it.
Yeah, and unless you literally make the phone 3 times as thick. We talked about this before. The expected slimness of the phone is something like 5.5 millimeters, and the camera bump is 4 millimeters. So unless you wanted the entire phone to be almost 10 millimeters thick, that's just silly. And it also serves other purposes. I mean, the flash needs to function, but if the flash and the camera are on the same plane, you're in danger of the flash getting, basically widening out the interrupting the capture. Now, of course, timing the frames. This is something you have to do with manual cameras. If you're manually shooting and you have an external flash, you can actually time it so the flash of the bulb is happening milliseconds before the shutter closes, so that way the light fills the room, but the bulb is no longer flashing, and that is not captured in the photo. And that's computational happening for sure. In the iPhone, they're timing the release of that shutter with the release of the flash, so you're never capturing full flash. And if you ever take a live photo with flash on, you can see what I'm talking about a little bit. But the main photo that is taken is not taken with the flash actively open, drowning out the camera itself, overexposing the photo. So it's still better, though, that the flash is physically behind the lens.
I have no idea about that. That's fascinating. I love it. Where I was going with this, sorry, I'm now into photography mode. Come back, William. What I'm thinking is, if this year we get a slimmer iPhone, does that mean next year all iPhones will be that slim because now they can do it?
No. I think this model's going to be compromised in different ways. And that's why it's going to be so thin. And then the Pro models are still going to be a similar thickness to what we have now, maybe a little thinner. But the camera bar being what it is just gives more space. So it's like they're taking 2 different approaches, right? On one side, the camera bar lets them go thinner. And the other side, the camera bar lets them stay the same thickness while adding more features. So the thinner phone won't get any more features than it already has. It'll basically be an iPhone 16 Plus, just thinner, with no new features, whereas the Pro phones will be the same thickness but have more features like more battery life, better cameras. That's the approach I think they're taking here.
When I first heard about the slimmer iPhone rumors, it occurred to me that this could be a step towards a folding iPhone, because one of the problems with folding an iPhone, I mean, there are many problems with it, but if you fold it over, it's twice the thickness, and that could be pretty thick indeed. Does it make sense then that the similar one is like a practice run for doing a fold next year?
Yes and no. I mean, Apple doesn't need to do a practice run. They could just build this internally and never release a slim phone. I think it's just to test interest. They want to see, like, this slot in the lineup. Now, note that the standard 17, the standard 17 has the same camera bump that it always has, right? It's this one's a vertical one with a flash to the side. I think that's actually the same style as the 16. I'm not looking at one right now, so I couldn't tell you. But the 17 is going to be almost identical to the 16, other than the chipset being newer. I think in almost every way. Feature-wise, there might be something new. Maybe the camera control gets a little better, something like that. But physically, it's going to be identical in design and all. It's still full aluminum backing and all of that. And we've seen that in the dummies. We've seen that in the rumors. And then this slim phone is replacing the Plus. It's Slim, Air, whatever. There's different nomenclature going around. Nobody knows what Apple's going to call it. Nobody does. But this Air Slim phone is replacing the Plus, which replaced the Mini. This slot in Apple's lineup is their experimental slot. No one bought the Mini. Even though there was a very loud vocal minority that liked it, no one bought it. The Plus does not sell, really. If people are buying the Plus, they're honestly just going up to Pro Max or Pro. So that price range is just tricky to play with. So they're going very unique this time by saying it's not a 17. It's not a 17 Pro. It has its own very unique feature set. And one of those features is thinness without a compromised body. I'm sure we'll see someone try to bend it in half and maybe even succeed, but it's going to be difficult. So we'll see. But I think that's the selling point on this one is it's not that it's a bigger 17. It's not that it's a Pro Max without the Pro Max features. It's its own thing, and that'll be an interesting selling point. Now, if this leads to a folding phone later, cool, but I still don't think the folding phone will ever exist.
This episode is brought to you by Fast Growing Trees. Did you know Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the US with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the US. They have all the plants your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever plants you're interested in, Fast Growing Trees has you covered. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Now, as it happens, my space is in the UK, and possibly, unfortunately, so is my climate. But this means I can't order directly from Fast Growing Trees the way you can. But what I can do, and actually what I keep on doing recently, is checking out Fast Growing Trees' gardening advice online. We've had this thing with storm damage, meaning unfortunately, we really need to get rid of a tree. But at the same time, we don't want to, and we don't want to leave that section of the yard bare. So we are looking at replacement trees, more manageable replacement trees, what we could use in that area. Plus, of course, you know what it's like, having spent that extra time in the garden looking into this, we're getting hooked on finding the right plants to go all over the place for it. Cue the advice of Fast Growing Trees online yet again. So while I basically dream and look through the website selection, and actually seriously while I read its advice, you should go order plants. They'll be shipped direct to your door in just a few days. And this spring, they have the best deals for your yard, up to half off select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code AppleInsider at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code AppleInsider at checkout. So, fastgrowingtrees.com, code AppleInsider. Now's the perfect time to plant and use Apple Insider to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time, though, and terms and conditions may apply. But thanks to Fast Growing Trees for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast. You said there about gauging interest, and actually, this is something I know about because I've just written about it, and I am extremely interested. I think, forget folding phones and folding iPads, which we are hearing rumours about. This week, we found a patent application from Apple with detailed drawings and specifications of a folding Apple Watch. Have you come across this, or is this all news to you?
I saw the article and the image, and that's about it. Patents are fun. They patent everything. I literally could not tell you what this is for, other than pretending, what is it, Dick Tracy? Or,
yes, that's what I thought. Yes.
Because I believe, or a 007 a couple of times has had a watch that opens up and has like sleeping darts inside of it or something.
Okay, doesn't really fit Apple's health remit, but it's still possible. Yes.
If you're having trouble falling asleep, then there you go. Maybe you store a little Ambien in there and just. But no, cool. No, foldables are such a funny thing. Like it's a proof of concept. We've seen a folding display, I believe, since like 2014 CES, and that was when they were rolling them up like scrolls. They're like, look at this OLED panel roll, and cool, but the utility of it made it to foldables, and again, cool, but it's so fragile. Yes. And people are already mad at the fragility of the current iPhones, and they're pretty tough. Could you imagine handing them a piece of glass and being like, okay, hold this daintily, never drop it, set it down very gently, and when you close it slowly, right?
One thing I want to add about, you said fragility there. We're saying a folding Apple Watch, and that is what it describes, but actually it's like two screens on a hinge. And back long ago, back on Series 0, as it was later called, the Apple Watch, I was on holiday somewhere in bed, and I looked at the time, and at the time you had to turn your wrist before it would light up, and then you turn it away and it darkens again. I did that, and as I turned my wrist back, the whole front display flapped open. It's like on three sides, just gone, and it was just hinging on that. So I'm reading this patent saying it would deliberately hinge on one side, and they give reasons that you could have a video conferencing camera in there. They actually say that this is a way to replace the smartphone by giving you more screen real estate when you need it. And I got all of that, but all the way through I'm thinking it'd break. It would break the moment you kept doing that. So yeah, I'm with you on fragility, but I'm still tempted. And if Series 11 Apple Watch has it, I might be persuaded to upgrade. But you wouldn't, or no, because you buy each new Apple Watch, don't you?
I try to convince myself I don't need it, and then end up buying it anyway. So I've had every generation of watch so far. Maybe this year will be when that breaks, but I doubt it.
Right.
All right. So, we were going to mention the iPhone 16 E, the C1. It's doing pretty well. 5G tests are surpassing regular 16 phone tests with Qualcomm chips. Cool. That was a test conducted by Ookla, which is basically everyone uses Ookla to do speed tests, so they get to gather all this data and see what device is running the test. And so they're saying iPhone 16e is showing faster speeds. Cool. But we're moving on from that because we have a lot to talk about. And I wanted to mention this breaking news. Apple has, removed John Giannandrea from the AI lead position and replaced him with Mike Rockwell.
Okay,
now,
goodness. No, I did not know that. That is up to the second news as we record this. Details.
Okay, so this isn't official yet, but it is happening this week. This is one of those secret Bloomberg things where they're on an email list they shouldn't be, I think, and they're just getting all of they've hacked Tim Cook's email and they're just seeing all of the correspondence. But
well, if you're going to hack somebody, okay, yeah.
So later this week, Apple will announce to employees that John Giannandrea is being shifted out and being replaced with the current lead of the Apple Vision Pro project, Mike Rockwell. And Rockwell is actually, I believe, the one who was upset and yelling at the Siri team in closed meeting. And I guess Tim Cook is just like, okay, well, you take it. No, I'm sorry. That was Robbie Walker, Apple's senior director of Siri. So Mike Rockwell is going to be, so they're different teams, right? So Siri is a team and then AI is a team. And we've known John Giannandrea has been doing this for a while. He was originally brought in, I believe, from Google.
Yes, he was Google's head of AI at the time, whenever that was. Can't remember. Yeah.
And he was brought in to work on the AI of a driving car, right, for Project Titan. And I guess that skill set would have been fine there, but then he had to shift to the Apple Intelligence move, and maybe John Gianandrea is the reason why Apple didn't have AI in 2022 along with ChatGPT, because he was still focused on the car. And right, here we are, we're seeing all of this happen, all this friction of getting this release. I don't think he's quote unquote fired. He's probably still somewhere in the company. This is all very early news, but according to Bloomberg's note here, Tim Cook apparently lost confidence in Gianandrea's ability to execute serious product development. So he's being replaced. Now, whether or not Gianandrea leaves the company is up in the air, but this new replacement, the reason why, now you're asking, why Mike Rockwell? Well, he, I haven't done the research, so I'm not going to speak too off the cuff, but I believe he's been in charge of other projects to get off the ground. Maybe he was an Apple Watch guy, so don't quote me on that, but he was put in charge of Apple Vision Pro, and he was the reason why it went from struggling to get out the door to release, and he's shown the ability to basically get these more nascent projects off the ground through his leadership. So this should be interesting. Now, WWDC is in June. They've known what was going to be announced there probably since December, so I doubt this changes anything today, but it could mean by the end of the year, bigger changes coming to Apple Intelligence, and we'll see.
Well, I knew nothing of this, but actually I'm kind of surprised and not surprised at the same time, because you mentioned this new guy having been on Apple Vision Pro, but he's not the only one. January sometime, Kim, I think it's pronounced Verath maybe, was moved from Apple Vision Pro to Apple Intelligence, and she apparently is known within Apple as a fixer. You drop her into somewhere that's having trouble and it gets done. I'm wondering, is this her getting it done for Apple Intelligence? That's quite. I wish we could get an interview with her or something, or that one day all of this story would come out. But for now, I'm a little bit shocked, actually.
Yeah.
But okay.
This wasn't totally expected, but it's not unheard of. I mean, this isn't Forstall's Maps debacle, but it's definitely Apple. Like, the attention on this is overwhelming, and I feel like that Tim Cook and others are feeling it a little bit more than they should. Apple's usually good at ignoring these things, but perhaps this will result in some forward motion. Again, my perspective is still that Apple Intelligence is mostly fine. It could be more, but I think this AI ceiling is coming faster than people think, and regardless of whether people think Apple's behind now, they will have a chance to quote-unquote catch up to the competition, because the competition won't have anywhere else to go very soon. And it will then, once it's all kind of an equal playing field, we'll see who's better or whatever that means. I'm still rooting for the team of privacy security on device, and Apple's the only one who cares about that. So
I said recently that I'd been booked to speak about AI at a particular event, and they dropped it because the bookings were just so low. Actually, this week I've learned I'm also not going to be speaking at a certain festival later in this year because they've just dropped the whole thing. Actually, I was going to say that is public interest in AI waning, but actually maybe it's just me. Maybe they don't want me for it. Okay.
Well, there's a lot of desperation, and maybe we'll get to that later in the show. But there's definitely a lot of flailing arms in the AI space of, look at us, we're so cool. And it's not, I mean, anyway, we'll get back to it maybe if we have time today. But first, I wanted to do a little PSA. Apple Passwords had this issue, and we've got some clarification on that issue.
Okay. So this is not Apple Maps debacle strength again, is it?
So these researchers found that they could basically, if they were on a privileged network, so if you're on a coffee shop Wi-Fi, and there's a bad actor actively looking for people who would be doing this, I guess, they could intercept the HTTP protocol and swap in a fake website, and then hopefully they would log in to that fake website, and then now they have your login credentials for that fake website. Sure. problem is several things. One, this never actually would have worked. Ricky Mondello on Mastodon, passwords person at Apple, clarified a few things, so I want to go over that. But real quick, first of all, the circumstances for this to even be possible is incredible. So first, you'd have to be on iOS 18 to 18.1 sometime in those 3 months. So before you updated to 18.2, you had to be on a Wi-Fi network with a bad actor on the same Wi-Fi network that knows about the exploit, which was not public at the time. So no one actually knew about it. They would have to be actively searching for people who would be doing this, intercepting that information and swapping it in. But the only reason this would happen isn't from general browsing. You'd have to be in the Passwords app, selecting a password and telling it to change the password, and having the Passwords app route you to a website in Safari. And then they would intercept that routing because it would initially be HTTP, and there would be a 301 redirect to HTTPS. Mid-redirect, you would get redirected to the malicious place, and then they would steal your passwords. Problem is with all of that is none of that ever happened. The amount of things that would have to be happening for it to even occur is astronomical, the odds. But also, Ricky Mondello clarified that this was never even really an issue, because all of these information fetches, so fetches for the logos, were made in a stateless fashion with no attempt to fill or provide credentials. So when you're fetching the logo, it's not telling you anything about who you are or where it came from. Mm-hmm. In fact, all these fetches from the Apple Passwords app, whether you have the feature enabled or not, Passwords makes the fetches over iCloud Private Relay. So it doesn't even have your IP address. It doesn't even have your location. The website giving you the logo has none of your information, and none of your password data is being shared. Now, if a user is actively trying to change their password and they're not trying to intercept a logo fetch, whatever, and you're going through the password changing dialog, it's sending you through Safari, which basically puts up a giant red banner saying this is an illicit website. So even if somehow all of the conditions were met, that you were actively changing a password on a foreign network with a bad adversary looking for your traffic and swapped in a fake website, you would still open that fake website in Safari. Safari would warn you with big red letters, this is fraudulent, please leave. Check the certificate, whatever error would show up, it would be just no-go. Because what Passwords is not doing, it is not presenting the credentials without any user input. It is not automatic. The user has to enter the password field and then say, enter my password. So it just never affected anyone. And the only way at that point it could have is if you said, ignore all the warnings, force your password into that slot, and then give it away for free. So just wanted to put that little PSA out there. No one really needs to worry about this. It happened. People are using this as the usual, oh, look how bad. Maybe we should rely on Google Passwords. No, they should never have made the HTTP request for logos, yes. And it is now patched, but it just literally could not affect anyone if it wanted to.
Well, you say all this, but we never have any of those problems on Android. Far more secure, clearly.
Definitely, yeah. This episode is brought to you by Factor. A meal that is gourmet-style food you can pop in the microwave and have ready to eat in around 2 minutes. They've got a lot of great options that cover 8 dietary preferences across 40 different plates. You can choose between things like the keto meal diet, you can get chef's choice, and that's the one I went for. Basically, just get a little bit of everything. Lots of good food. I really enjoyed it, and some of their vegetarian plates were honestly the best ones they had to offer. They had these spicy sweet potatoes with peanut sauce that were just amazing. And they even have these cold-pressed juices that pair with a lot of the meals very well. So can't really say enough about it. I enjoyed everything they sent. Every meal came out of the microwave piping hot, good to go, and really good portions. I was never overstuffed or feeling hungry afterwards. Just the right amount of food, and it felt healthy, felt energized after I ate every meal. And, you know, I've also been eating them after my workouts, and it just feels like it's a good way to refuel after I've burned a lot of energy and get going throughout the rest of the day. Really, again, just those cold pressed juices were awesome for that. So As long as you choose the meals, your preferences that you enjoy, you'll really can't go wrong with Factor. They come in these pre-packed containers with dry ice that keep them refrigerated but never frozen, and you dispose of the box and everything's easily recyclable, and you pop them in your refrigerator, you eat for a week, and by the time you're done eating, the next box has arrived on your doorstep. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use the code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. And thanks to Factor for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast.
It seems to me that this was, kind of still is, a little bit of a controversy against Apple, but only a minor one compared to other things. And actually, after a couple of weeks of happy peacefulness, this week we do have to return to your idea of Controversy Corner. Would you like to explain what's going down?
Sure. I do want to point out we have a couple of things that we're going to throw away because of time. Go watch the new Spike Jonze ad for AirPods 4. That was fun. I enjoyed Pedro Pascal in it. You didn't like it? We'll have to talk about it.
Woody Allen style Stardust Memories at the start. He breaks up with somebody, and then is he flashing forward to when he's going to be happy or flashing back to it? And it's the same idea for about 5.5 minutes. And I kind of feel like, got that. Thanks.
It's a little long. It reminded me, though, that Spike Jonze did do an ad that is much better for the HomePod. Go watch that one.
Yes, I'd forgotten. That's excellent. I actually learned from that to say to, let's say, Iris, play me something I like. I didn't know that was a phrase you could use until that ad, and I use that constantly now, and it sometimes works.
And full practical effects on that one. So go watch the AirPods 4 one. That was cool. I did notice that the editors didn't catch that one of the guys in an orange jacket turned the wrong way at the end. And against the black and white section of the winter, there was just a guy in an orange jacket for a moment.
Apple's doomed.
They're doomed. They can't even make ads anymore.
Yeah.
But go watch the HomePod one. We'll have a link. It's no longer on Apple's YouTube, but people still have it on YouTube. So we'll have a link to that. It's so good. Third-party watches. Pebble exists. So I guess we can get into this in the controversy corner.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was quite interested by the fact that Pebble is announcing new smartwatches and they have a 30-day battery life and things like that. But the maker has said that's about all it'll have because Apple won't let us. And the moment he or she said that, the EU and the EC came out with all these things.
Well,
I should say, I said controversy corner is your idea, and it is. You have this neat way of saying we can cover everything that's bad in this bit, but then come back for happy things. So, as you would say, feel free to skip to the happy stuff. In fact, I'll call the next chapter Happy Stuff, so you can find it easily. For now...
Yeah, if you're still listening, this is now the political stuff that people don't want to hear. And
we need a doomy, ominous-sounding music soundtrack bed at this point. I'll work on it. I'm just basically trying to put you off starting now, aren't I? Because I don't want to hear it. But okay, far away.
We got a few things here. So... I wanted to mention OpenAI briefly. They're asking the government to basically legalize theft. So because they're complaining that China can do whatever it wants when it's creating DeepSeek and steal from the world because there's really no regulations or whatever. It's a very exaggerated claim, but generally, sure, there is no leash on DeepSeek, and China regulators are not the same as U.S. or European regulators. So they're saying, hey, U.S. government, make it legal that we can use any copyright data, any data that we find, even if it's bolted down and behind a security door, because, hey, we're going to fall behind China if we can't steal everything for free. It's too hard to pay for things, even though Apple paid millions of dollars for copyright data while training Apple Intelligence. They also want the government to digitize everything that isn't digital because OpenAI can't crawl what's on paper. So... basically, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the AI peak. They're scrambling a bit. They've trained on all of the available data, copyrighted or not, legal or not. They've already stolen everything on the internet and created what they could with it. Now the only thing that's left is to train on AI-generated data, which is bad. And now they're saying, where else can there be more data? Oh, yeah, all the stuff that's illegal to train on right now. Let's make it legal. Regulation bad. So we'll see what happens with that request. Who knows? But just wanted to point out, very clear signs of an AI ceiling upon us. This AGI or SAI or ASI or whatever all these acronyms are, just what doesn't exist. There's no sentient computer, right? We're not going to get these general intelligence that's vastly superior to human intelligence. They can't even reason. It's no better than a cat on a piano connected to a computer that Google searches based on which note it's pressing, right? Like, it's so random. I saw someone, Tim Onion, who is the leader of the Onion newspaper, he said something along the lines of, people think AI is God when in fact it's closer to an automatic dog feeder. I appreciated that. That's pretty accurate. Anyway, we'll see what happens with OpenAI. Do you have any comments on that?
No, a few years ago, I would have thought it had no chance. And now the way all world politicians are going, I don't know, it could get it, which would be a depressing thought. For everyone who creates anything at all, it's a bad news all round.
The good news is it will all implode on itself because it's all a fad, and while there's some good technologies coming from OpenAI, ChatGPT, Apple Intelligence, Google Gemini, there's good, useful things that increase productivity. The world-ending economic shutdown level of whatever nonsense they're promising will never happen because it can't. Not with the current technology that they have. They'll have to find new technology to end the world with. So we've got time. The House Committee subpoenaed Apple over AI censorship, which is really funny to me because Apple Intelligence, where would you even censor anything? I guess in the writing tools, it would be like you can't be a conservative or something. I don't know. So that's happening. They did the same thing over machine learning and social media. And Apple isn't a social media company. They're like, is iMessage blocking voices? It's like, no. It's just.
But to be fair, the committee is focusing on the real issues that are facing Americans today. This is more important than, housing, unemployment. But yeah, get me out of this. I'm in a funk. Anything else to worry about?
Yeah, the AI subpoena thing is silly. It's just not going to lead to anything. The EU is working really hard to make sure this gets back to Pebble. So they are basically saying, Apple, we want you to open up everything that you've ever built proprietary for iPhone to third parties because it's unfair that you invented these really cool things that no one else has access to. That's more or less what they're doing. And
a key phrase there is, you said they're saying to Apple, they are not saying it to anyone else. They said, it's really, I know as a writer I focus on minute details of words and things, but the way they word their announcement about this is they talk about gatekeepers, plural. And they have an official list of what they call gatekeepers. They're platforms that have more than a certain number of users in Europe. So Apple is one of them, but so is Google, so is Meta, ByteDance, Microsoft, and there's a sixth, I think. There are 6 of them. And all the way through, the announcement is talking about gatekeepers, plural, 6 of them. But then right at the crux, it says, and it will direct gatekeepers to free up its technology for its services. It's suddenly back to singular because the only firm they're the only firm they're telling is Apple. And I find that untoward. Yeah.
There's just so many things here. They want AirPlay, iMessage. They want everything that has to do with Apple Watch connection to iPhone. All of these things to be opened up. Now, I'm not arguing anything here that says Apple should be this closed up wall garden thing that doesn't let anything happen ever, right? But for me personally, I wonder if this echoes you, and this is where we're going to get to in Apple Insider Plus. Do you think Apple is too closed? Because for me personally, I bought into Apple for its closed ecosystem. I want the iPhone and Apple Watch. I don't want a Galaxy Watch for my iPhone. I don't really want a Pebble. I don't need one. 30-day battery life is useless to me. My watch never dies. I'm never in danger of my watch dying. So it's neat that these competitors exist. And here's the whole deal. Apple as a whole operates on this level of starting closed and then working its way to open. It always has. Certain things it never opens because it's got a competitive advantage, like iMessage. But I do believe something like Apple Watch is something that they could slowly allow more notifications from. You will never see iMessage notifications on a Galaxy Watch, but they could allow more features. Now, I don't know what features third parties are looking for beyond notifications, because you can already create fitness bands and health trackers that connect heart rate data to your Apple Health. You can already get SMS alerts on third-party watches, just not iMessage. And you can configure alerts from specific apps if the app is installed on the third watch. Now, that watch would also need access to its own app store, probably through its own Wi-Fi connection. So there are limitations Apple could address, but it doesn't require like deep access to iOS to do this, and that's what EU is asking for.
We do actually know one of the things that are being asked for, because Meta, Facebook, Apple published a list of the things it's been asking for. And one of them is full details of a user's Wi-Fi use. So the network and when it's on, when it's off.
It's silly.
Especially given that the European Commission says it had discussions with all of the people involved, developers, and that Facebook Meta is one of the gatekeepers. You would have thought someone there would ask Meta, why does Facebook need to know what Wi-Fi network a user is on? There isn't a single advantage to the Facebook user. There's no change, no benefit, nothing to it. But there is an advantage, a commercial advantage to Facebook, knowing that you shop at this place that has this Wi-Fi network and things. So this is one of the countless things that upset me about the European Commission at the moment. And I'm actually really pro EU generally. I think it's an amazing organisation that's brought together, well, now 27 member states, but then they do this and it seems it's political.
The problem with most regulation is the regulators don't know what they're asking for. It sounds nice on paper. Why not just let iPhone be open? But then when you really examine it, why does iPhone exist the way it does? Why does Apple's ecosystem exist the way it does? Because of open and free markets and competition. Google and Android chose open first, work to close. Apple chose the opposite direction. It is not a leader. It is not a majority. Apple does not run anything majority in any market, right? And yet it is being treated as if it is the only option on the market. And people are upset that they can't buy an iPhone and run their Samsung Galaxy Watch on it. It doesn't really make sense. I've alluded to this before. It's like asking PlayStation to run Xbox discs, or to allow Apple Vision Pro to use, I don't know, like there's just so many weird hardware things here that it doesn't make sense. But then you have to consider that Apple is probably working towards it anyway, because they want more customers to be interested in their devices, right? I think USB-C was always coming. It had nothing to do with the EU mandate. And that 10-year deadline just happened to line up with the mandate. So it made them look like the heroes, I guess. But regulation can do good things. We got the ability to do emulators through regulation. I just think that some of this stuff is way overstepping what it needs to. Let Apple innovate. Let them use their proprietary technologies to their benefit. But also ask them openly, do you intend to ever open this to third parties? How? And then have them say on the stand what they want to do. That maybe not reveal future proprietary plans, but at least let them know, hey, yes, this is complicated. We can't just open it up to this watch. It's difficult, but we are working with X manufacturer to make this happen. Pebble will be able to run on iOS later this year because of this thing. Maybe the EU could even mandate that there could be an interoperability clause, but don't describe how the technology should work. They're not the experts. They don't know. Tell Apple to make things interoperable to work with third parties, but don't tell them how to do it. That's the overstep. That's the issue.
Wes, I think ominous controversy music has come to an end now. It's time for happy stuff. And I know, have you got more?
No, more? I got one more because this is important.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid I'll forget about it next week. So I want one last little thing here. I'm curious to our listeners who are overseas what you think of this. So U.S. conferences are coming up, big Comic-Cons and video game conferences, all these summer fests. And one of them is the Worldwide Developer Conference, right?
Yeah.
Held in June. It is increasingly not a good idea to visit United States on any kind of travel visa or in anything. This is not an exaggeration. Multiple people have been arrested for simply being in the United States with a visa. Right? Go look up the story about the 2 Canadians who were coming across the Mexico border who were detained for more than a week in prison after committing no crime, and just detained for no reason and then released to Canada a while later. The woman describes the event as if she was kidnapped, basically. And this is happening across the United States. There was a man from Germany in New York who was just arrested for being a German who is visiting the United States legally. And so there's all these really bad examples of you don't want to be a tourist in the United States right now. And it's a very scary time for that. And hopefully maybe this will be clamped down on by June and we won't have to worry about it as much. But today, if there was a WWDC, I would say don't come. Just flat out, do not travel from overseas to Cupertino. It's just too dangerous. So my question is, and Comic-Con's actually already talking about this. Comic-Con's a huge thing every year in San Francisco or maybe Las Vegas. And every year in Las Vegas, people from around the world attend. It's this big comic book thing. They're telling foreign people, maybe don't. Straight up. Like, that's how they make their money, is all this travel. Yeah. And they're just straight up telling their people, no, just it's bad. Don't come here right now, because Comic-Con, I believe, is coming up pretty soon. I don't know the exact date. So I wonder, what could Apple do to alleviate this? I don't think they're going to completely not do a WWDC in Cupertino. Maybe they'll still have their remote viewing event for United States citizens there. But maybe they should have a few more venues open up around the world, like Battersea. And then that way you, William, could go and enjoy WWDC just abroad. And
well, actually, I've been invited to Battersea, but I haven't been yet. I know there was, it might have been, it was either the last iPhone launch or it was WWDC last year, but there was a kind of Battersea joint event. It was iPhone, was it? So
I think so. I think so.
Right. So there's precedent as well. But frankly, more urgently is that I have a significant birthday coming up, and I was trying to decide, do I go to New York, which is in fact my favourite place in the world, or do I go to Norway? I was just looking through the ends, basically. But I think you may have made my decision there.
Well, so to color this a little differently, a little more positive note, bad things happen in the world, right? COVID happened to us, but it's what gave us these really fun produced Apple event videos. They're really well done. Yeah. And maybe this government action that is causing so much chaos and ruining travel to the United States. I mean, this isn't a biased opinion. Sorry, guys. This is just what's happening. Go read about it. It's making traveling to America really hard right now. I wonder if this would have a reflection on Apple, and maybe for the better, make the Worldwide Developer Conference truly worldwide. Let's have it everywhere. Why isolate it to one place and force everyone to travel to one country? Apple has these beautiful different buildings and studios around the world. They could have events everywhere, and because it's just a live broadcast of a pre-recorded video, and then they could have different executives and different developers travel the world and just be available at different venues. And that way the people from other places, especially China and Germany and France, for some reason they're being targeted specifically, don't have to come to the United States while it's really dangerous for them to do so. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Apple's going to announce this thing any day. So we'll see what they do.
They are expanding their premises in Cork in Ireland. So yeah, just put a few more seats in. They could do it. Okay, we're leaving controversy behind and heading into happy stuff. This is now the happy stuff chapter. But I'm relying on you to cheer me up here, because you're the one who has what I presume is happy news. What have you got? Where are you going to leave me?
Well, so I finally sat down and watched the 25-minute concert video for Metallica on Apple Vision Pro, and it was amazing. Like, Apple should have 20 of these a week, honestly. Just go around the world and record everything everywhere. It was complicated. Obviously, they had to set up a stadium with like 15 different cameras on all these different units. But, I mean, is that no different than any other live broadcast NBC having to go set up 15 cameras at a live broadcast, right? It's expensive, but Apple has the money. They have the equipment. Just go record the next concert somewhere. Set up your cameras and make it happen. It was awesome.
Was this a full audience concert, not just a specially staged thing?
The audience was like part of the show. It was crazy. It was a packed. So this was, I believe, they were in Mexico City, part of their tour that they were doing, and the cameras were all over the stage. Even some of the angles you could see where the other cameras were, which is always fun to be like, hey, look. But there were some over the crowds, and they would do these boom moves over, or whatever, these pulley moves over the crowds, looking down in 3D of them reaching up and doing, rocking out to the music. And then they'd go down to crowd level, and people would be like getting in the face of the camera, like swinging their arms and going crazy, listening to the music. And one of the views, my favorite view, I think, was we were just behind the drummer, and you could just see the drummer playing on the drum set, looking back at the camera sometimes, making crazy faces. It was just so much fun. It was such a blast. And again, they just need to do this everywhere, all the time.
The only trouble is I've never particularly taken to Metallica, so
it was some of their more publicly acceptable, because they can get pretty heavy in some of their songs, but Whiplash is more of a classic rock style. One, of course, everyone knows One. I love that one. That one feels almost I can't say the word.
Well, you hum it, I'll recognize it, but okay.
And then Enter Sandman, of course, is the fan favorite. So, and of the three, for me, One was definitely my favorite of the three performances. And there was a little bit of intersplicing of commentary from the band members and cutaways to the backstage. It was just really cool. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's just do it. You can do this every time. You don't need to do it at every venue. Just maybe set up a venue that is like a main venue on a concert tour that everyone goes to, and just film when people pass through and just make it part of Apple Music, right? Like, come on. It's right there. But Lars Ulrich, right? He's the lead of Metallica. He's just up front the whole time. You get to see him playing the guitar and singing into the microphone. It's just they just seem to have a blast making this as well. And I just wanted to point out, it's so funny that they're so closely partnered with Apple. They countered Taylor Swift back when Apple Music was launching, saying, we are excited for Apple Music. And they even got an Apple Music show on Beats One at the time, on now Apple Music One radio. But I don't know if you remember this, William, but they were just hated the idea of digital music back in 2000.
No, I didn't know that. Okay. I mean, I'm not surprised, but okay.
I think there was even a lawsuit, and they were some of the biggest vocal people saying, "Hey, screw this. We hate streaming music." What happened is they found an entire album and an unreleased track on Napster, on Napster, and were basically saying, "We're never going digital." And then a few years later, they said, "Well, we overstated it. We didn't realize how important digital would be for the future." And then they started supporting it, and that's why they got behind Apple. And then they started saying, Apple's the only one we trust here with our music and with our vision, and they can actually execute. And then here they are, a decade after that statement, on Apple Music, making a Apple Vision Pro concert. So that's pretty exciting.
So Wes, in a moment I will ask you about any reviews of the show. But first, if anyone wants to say to you that Sandman just means Logan's Run to them, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, I am available on Blue Sky. You can find me there. I'm pretty active. You can also message me on Mastodon or send me an email, wes@appleinsider.com.
Great. And just to complete it for me, same, william@appleinsider.com. But I also have a YouTube channel, 58 Keys. And actually, normally that's for writers who write on Apple gear. But this time I think it's particularly relevant to us because it has my first ever unboxing video of that Mac Studio I bought, and I'm not making this up. I have been told it is the best unboxing video certain people have ever seen. Okay, so watch it and you will see why. Okay, but that's it. That's me. That's being told nice things about my videos. Has anybody been saying nice things about this podcast?
Well, I think we got what would be an edit because the title says Steven. This is a reference Steven made, I think, about 5 years ago to Dub Dub. But the text has been changed, so they're addressing us today. This is D Miller 425, and they said that they really enjoy the Apple Insider podcast. They find it a good review of Apple's products and services, and they even appreciate the content conjecture, even around the politics. They like learning about how it's affecting the technology sector, that it must be discussed, and that we do a good job or a masterful job providing the information without any vitriol that sometimes accompanies politically adjacent subject matter. Thank you for all the hard work, gentlemen. So thank you for that review.
That's excellent. Thank you. Although my head is now so big, I'm going to have to stick around for Apple Insider Plus before I can, my head goes down and I can fit out of the room. I should say we have mentioned Apple Insider Plus a couple of times, but we haven't explained that it is the ad-free and, more significantly now, extended version of Apple Insider Plus. More significant now because that's the bit that's about to happen. If you are a subscriber via Patreon or through Apple Podcast subscriptions, then you can stick around for a little while, and there's more to come. If not, you can't really. That suddenly ended badly. It would be a great treat to have you if you can, but if you can't, then otherwise, Wes and I will see you next week.
Yep, and if you're an Apple Insider Plus subscriber, this week's topic is, I think I mentioned it briefly before, but it's going to be about Apple being a closed ecosystem. Is that a good or a bad thing, and what are we doing about it, right? So stick around for that. Don't worry, it won't get super weird or political or whatever. It's just specifically about the closedness of Apple and what it needs to do to open up better, or if it needs to open up at all. But hope you guys stick around for that.
Yeah, it's not going to get more political, but past record, there's a chance of weirdness in Apple Insider Plus, but we'll find out in a moment. Thank you very much for listening, and also thank you hugely to our sponsors this time, Fast Growing Trees and Factor. Speak to you next time.
Yep, talk then.